Hey guys, it's Max. Welcome to my low-light comparison between the brand new Fujifilm X-H1 and the brand new A7 III. Both these cameras are just launched, or they're just launching now, and they both are at a similar price point. This one's a little bit less expensive if you don't have the grip, but a lot of people are going to be getting the grip, which is going to make it more expensive than the A7 III. That way they have better battery life, they have a headphone jack, and they can record for 30 minutes instead of 15-minute clips in 4K. So this has a full frame sensor. That's kind of an advantage. This one has a 200 megabit per second codec versus 100. We'll see if that makes any difference. Now, this is the first time where I really had to kind of dive deep into the picture profiles and the settings to see and match these cameras up as best they can. So I did have some issues. I was hoping that this Fuji would not be exposing much darker like the previous Fujis did, but that is the case. So before we look at these side-by-sides, I want to give you guys a quick explanation and let you know what I did to find the best picture profile to compare these at. So here I'm showing you guys a side-by-side shot at 800 ISO. Look how much darker the Fuji is. It's crazy. This is about one stop, and on top of that, it has too much contrast, way too much contrast, and that's the case with a lot of the Fujifilm picture profiles. So what I ended up doing is, in order to get the exposure similar, I had to expose 2/3 stops brighter on this camera. And sometimes it's still darker than the Sony. And because of that, on these side-by-side shots, you guys are going to see, and I think this is a more fair way to do this, where I'm looking at 800 ISO, I'm going to be using 1250 on here. If I'm looking at 3200, I'm using 6000, I believe, right around there on here. You guys will see at the top right-hand corner of the Fuji, because that's what it should be at. It's just unrealistic exposure values. And if you're using a Fuji and you're coming from any other camera brand, you're used to a low-light situation, you're going to have to raise the ISO much higher to get the right results. And unfortunately, this is the case, and that's how I'm going to set them up to see your real-world low-light performance and differences. And here I'm going to turn on 1600 on the Fuji, 800 on the Sony right here. So you see the exposures more similar. Of course, that contrast is still crazy. I tried playing with the different contrasts, different picture profiles, and the one that I found that would work best is the brand new picture profile they're putting in. It's called Eterna. So here you guys will see the Eterna picture profile. And this is with some saturation added in. So they say it's kind of like a low contrast, flatter profile. I think the contrast isn't really low in this picture profile. It looks just normal to me, other than the saturation being low. So I boosted up the saturation just to make it more realistic looking. And this is side by side here. So this was one stop brighter on the Fuji, and it looks almost identical. So the rest of the shots I did 2/3 stops brighter. I also messed around with the noise reduction settings. Now on the Sony, there's multiple noise reduction settings, so you can lower the noise reduction, but as far as I know, it's just in the photo side. So I'm going to be taking a look at that in the future, but I tested the noise reduction at 0 and +4, and honestly, I mean, I see that it's a little bit less noise, but there's almost no difference, and the detail does go down. So for these tests, I kept the noise reduction on default on this camera, just like it is on the Sony. Now, I also want to say I'm going to be doing a lot more video comparisons on lots of aspects of these cameras. I'm going to do a full video like you guys saw on the A7 III against the A7S II that's on my channel. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button and enable those notifications if you guys want to check that out. Now, lastly, before we look at these side-by-side shots, I have to give a big shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring the channel. I've built 5 websites using Squarespace, and I've been recommending them for over 4 years now. So when they reached out and wanted to sponsor the channel, it was a no-brainer. Whether you're wanting to build a portfolio site, e-commerce, blog, or anything else, they have got you covered. They have an easy-to-use website builder and great templates with automatic versions for mobile devices. Follow the link in the video description to start your free trial with no credit card required and to get 10% off your first purchase. So let's look at these side-by-side shots. We're going to start off with ISO 800, real-world ISO 800, which is 1250 on the Fuji. So it is fairly close. I am seeing more noise on the Fuji here. The Sony looks very, very clean. I basically don't see any noise at all. And you guys can let me know what you guys think in the video description below. The Fuji, I do see some noise on the background and a little bit of noise on the face as well, but it definitely looks quite good. Now let's jump up to ISO 1600. The Sony still looks super clean. The Fuji, I do see noise everywhere, and I do see quite a bit on the shirt, but on the black of the monitor in the background, it is fairly clean for this ISO range, so not a big jump between 800 and 16. Now we're at 3200 real world ISO. The Fuji's at 5000 to get to this exposure level, and it's a little bit darker than the Sony. The noise is jumping up. I'm seeing it more in the background, but it's not horrible, so not bad, honestly. At 6400, the Sony still looks very clean. Of course, it's great in low light. The Fujifilm, I think this is too much noise for me personally. It's at 10,000 ISO now. I see it everywhere on the face. It is a bit distracting. I'm not sure what you guys will see on YouTube. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And we had to bring this up to 10,000, which is almost at the peak, 12,800 of the normal ISO range. Now we're going to take a look at ISO 16,000 equivalent. Now that's because on the Fuji, if you go from 10,000 to 12,800, and next step up is right away the high mode, and that's 25,600. And in order to keep my exposure the same, I had to skip my standard 12,800 equivalent mode. So here, the Fuji's at 25,600 setting. It's not actually that high in the ISOs, and it is a ton of noise. It's definitely unusable here. The Sony is usable, but I am seeing some smoothing on the hairline because of that noise reduction algorithm. I'll be exploring more in the future on if we can fix that, eliminate that. I'd rather have a little bit more grain, but less noise reduction smoothing. As far as detail, the Fuji does look more detailed, but of course it has way more noise, and it definitely does not look good. And the last side-by-side I want to show you is a Sony at 3200 and the Fuji at 800 ISO. And if you take a look, the Sony has less noise and actually a little bit more detail on the facial hair. You got to be careful because the Sony has less in focus, so the shirt looks like it's less detailed, but the shirt is slightly out of focus already at this focal length. If you look at 6400 on the Sony and 800 on the Fuji is a bit sharper. I don't know if that's got to do with the noise reduction or the lens sharpness of the Fuji or both. So as for the final verdict, I think nobody's going to be surprised that the Sony is definitely cleaner, at least 2 stops with no difference and no noticeable detail loss. If you don't mind losing a little bit of detail, probably even like 3 stops cleaner, something like that, and that is a very big difference. Typically, if you have a similar generation sensor, APS-C versus full frame would be about a 1-stop difference. So that is quite a big difference, and of course that is because the Fujifilm was underexposing. I think it does a little bit better than the X-T2 because of that 200 megabit per second codec, and that is something that I want to look into and compare how the codecs of all the Sony cameras compare to the new 200 megabit per second codec in this Fujifilm. So if you guys want to check that out, make sure you guys are subscribed and you have those notifications enabled. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'm excited to do more testing with this Fuji, put out some more videos, and in general, I really enjoy the Fujis. If you're interested in this camera, once again, I'll mention, check out my X-T2 review. Majority of that is going to apply to this camera as a similar sensor. Some things have been upgraded, but it's a great video, and you'll learn a lot about the Fuji system in regards to video. So thank you guys for watching. This has been Max. I will see you guys in the next video.